to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have the roll call.
Councilmember Boff.
Here.
Councilmember Stimmel.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Present.
Councilmember Strobehn.
Absent, excused.
Councilmember Cerveny. Here. Mayor Thornton.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there are no requests for any items to be removed, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next are council staff reports. I have a few things that I want to share with the council this evening. First of all, I just want to let everybody know that I will be canceling my mayor's town hall for next month. I will not be having a mayor's town hall in May. So I want to make notice of that. I'm sure everybody's happy to hear that, right, Skip? And then I have a couple of things I want to share with the council. I asked the deputy city clerk in preparation for city council meetings to check the different websites to see what national days there are and days of importance on any given month. And she was kind enough to do that, and come to find out, on any given month, there's an awful lot of things to be recognized. So I received pages and pages and pages of things to recognize. So I won't share all those with the council, but there are a couple here that I do want to share. It's actually kind of fascinating. But a little bit later in the meeting, Chief Denny, in his report, there's a note in there about the drug take-back event that's going to take place on Saturday, April 27th. But it's also on April 19th is the National Clean Out Your Medicine Cabinet Day. And National Clean Out Your Medicine Cabinet Day occurs annually on the third Friday in April. The goal is to raise awareness and effectively rid homes of unused or expired prescriptions and over-the-counter medications sitting in medicine cabinets, nightstands, kitchen cabinets, other areas in the house. So there is actually a national observation day for emptying out your cabinet. And the other one that I wanted to mention, which I really caught my eye, is the month of military children. And so April is National Month of Observations, Month of Military Children. The Month of Military Children in April recognizes the unique challenges children in military families face. They face continuing changing circumstances, and often both parents enlist active duty or reserve, meaning at any given time their primary caregivers can be deployed. Depending upon the size of the family, where they are stationed, how long they live in military life, a military child becomes adaptable. They may see much of the country and sometimes the world. Military life impacts every member of the family, right down to the youngest member. They sacrifice close relationships, sometimes even immediate family members, due to the distances they live and the numbers of transfers. They endure deployments just like their parents who stay behind with them. The month of the military child recognizes the sacrifices and the courage of these young Americans. And so in order to observe that, we should support our military families and our military children, celebrate their unique qualities and enduring contributions at events around the country. So anybody knows military families, I think it's really important that we recognize that, the entire family. So that one caught my eye and I wanted to share it with the council. So next on the agenda, I have the privilege this evening of recognizing one of the center's finest. And this evening we will be honoring Officer Alec Langlois for his extraordinary life-saving efforts and his dedication to law enforcement. Chief Denny will present Officer Langlois with the American Police Hall of Fame Life-Saving Award. On January 4th, 2019, Officer Langlois was advised by a passing motorist of a man on the ground next to a vehicle at a nearby intersection. Officer Langlois responded immediately and determined that the male had no pulse and no respirations. Officer Langlois requested that dispatch send medical to respond, and he began CPR. Officer Langlois administered CPR for approximately 7 minutes before an off-duty firefighter arrived and assisted him. Officer Langlois' actions at the scene and his calm demeanor under pressure assisted in saving the man's life. So this evening, we want to honor Officer Langlois for his efforts, and please join me in a round of applause for Officer Langlois. And Chief, if you would present him with his medals.
Yeah, I just want to say a few words. I mean, obviously, it was few and far between before we gave any of these life-saving awards out. But last year, we gave out 3, and this year, we're giving out another. This is a kind of rare situation because he's still in probation and he's getting a life-saving award. Hey, that's wonderful. So, I want to read the American Police Hall of Fame Museum letter to Officer Langlois. It is my pleasure to inform you that you've been awarded the Life-Saving Award of the National Awards Program of the American Police Hall of Fame. Our staff members join me in commending you for your valor and your service. Your professionalism in an emergency situation displays our dedication to service, to serve the public as a law enforcement officer. Your selfless acts saved a human life, and your actions should be recognized. The diligence and bravery you exhibited sets an admirable standard for all to follow. Again, please accept our congratulations on your nomination and award. The staff of the American Police Hall of Fame wishes you continued success in your career as a law enforcement officer. Sincerely, Jack L. Reinhardt, National President. So, with that, Officer Langlois, if you could come up here. That's the letter. Maybe a little sticker. And that's your award certificate. And we're going to get pictures.
Correct minutes?
Turn around and get a picture. And the accoutrements for your uniform.
Congratulations, officer. Great job. Thank you very much for your service. I think we'll get one. You're going to take off. You're going to get a picture of him. I think he's coming back. I would want to get out of here too if I was him.
On up here.
Oh, man.
Got to get more pictures, you know, that's what it's all about.
More Kodak moments.
I don't.
All right, guys, look over this way. Take another one. There you go.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Good job.
Whoops, sorry.
Almost round it.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the attorney's reports.
Let's see, I have just a few items, I guess kind of a schedule the events for the Growth Management Hearings Board appeal that's pending. I think I sent out notice of the oral argument on July 3rd?
Yeah, I think it was the 3rd. Yeah.
So that's still set. Remember, that appeal is of the underlying Growth Management Hearings Board decision, plus the Growth Board's compliance order, first time around compliance order, was also appealed and consolidated and is on the same appeal as that. The second compliance order was also appealed, and the court granted direct review recently, but it also, at our request, denied consolidating it with these appeals. So it's going to be on a slower track, a different track. These will not be delayed because of that. That was our fear. So that'll go ahead as planned. And I mentioned, it's a public hearing. It won't last too terribly long. Each side gets 15 minutes. The court may, extend it a little more because there are a lot of parties here. So basically, each side has to split with all the other parties on their side. And on the county side is Center, Ridgefield, Battleground. I think there's maybe one other group, and all the developers that have intervened. So the county's going to argue for all of us. I think the county attorney will give like 2 minutes to one other person. So that's how that's going to work. It's an interesting process. If you have time to go up to Tacoma, I recommend you go and watch this. Otherwise, just to let you know, I'm working with the mayor and Eric and Tony on putting together a development agreement for the Riverside Estates, which you've seen is kind of going through dirt moving right now. So we're watching that, working with the developer very closely. It has kind of changed hands, and so we're dealing with the buyer with a financial backer of Kevin Engelstad. So it's not a new person to the development, but he is now solely in charge of it. We're working with him to keep each of the phases on track and comply with the code. So there should be something on that on maybe the next agenda for you to review.
Yep.
And that's all I have for the moment, unless you have questions.
Questions? Okay. Thank you, Dan. So next we have council comments. Councilmember Boff.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. On March 29th, I attended the C-TRAN Board of Directors work session. It was a 4-hour session. I'll try to summarize 4 hours here in just a few minutes, just so everybody know how it went. The review was pretty much, it was started with a review of 2018, and a lot of positive things were said in that review, as you might expect. Some good things about C-TRAN. They did accomplish some great things in 2018. For example, their bus reliability increased and surpasses national standards. The BRT, that's the bus rapid transit line, along 4th Plain showed a ridership increase of 45% in 2017, and it bumped up to 19% in 2018. Not mentioned in the work session, but in a prior monthly meeting, it was commented that ridership overall was down, but the BRT line is the one that's showing the increase. It's believed that the increase in ridership is because of the increased frequency of the buses on the route. I believe they run something like every 10 minutes during the daytime, and clients like that. They don't have to wait long for the next bus. And the travel time into downtown from the mall, for example, is relatively fast. C-TRAN had a good audit. There's a triennial audit. The audit hit in 2018. They received a report of no deficiency. That's a clean audit. They are debt-free, and they do have money in reserves. Since they do have reserves, though, that does tend to work against them, especially when it comes for applying for grants. It's not hurting for the federal grants, but it may interfere with C-TRAN's ability to get state grants this year. There's been an emphasis this last year on internal development of employees. There was somewhat of a gap there at one time. Employees felt that there were not a lot of opportunities for internal advancement. So in this last year, C-TRAN has started an employee development department, and they're working with employees to increase their training and to have employees ready for the next step when those opportunities do arise. Long-term financial strategy is challenging. That's my word. Operating expenses are increasing, and operating revenue is declining. It's a trend that's happening, and they are watching that. One example, in the transit industry, as I'm learning, there's a term called fare box recovery. It's a measurement of financial health of a transit organization. In 2013, the fare box recovery was 20.3%, and in 2018, it's dropped down to 11.8%. The projection that C-Tran has at the present time is a decline in operating revenue through 2025, and they expect expenses to continue to increase. Now, what are they doing about that? They will be forming a special work group this next year, which will include some of the board of directors, and they'll be working together to develop a long-term financial plan. The first administrative people will be transferring from their present location. There's a new facility. I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. C-Tran has purchased a building off 112th Avenue, and they are refurbishing that, upgrading it to C-Tran's needs. And the first administrative personnel will be transferring there hopefully in May. And then when that happens, C-Tran will be making upgrades and renovations to their present facility off Andreessen. At the end of March, Sean Donahue, who is the CEO of C-Tran, along with Scott Patterson, who's the Chief External Affairs Officer, they traveled to Washington, D.C., and traveling with them was Mayor Ann McInerney-Ogle. Mayor McInerney is also the vice chair of C-Tran, and Vancouver Councilmember Ty Stober. The four of them traveled to Washington, D.C. They met with both the House and the Senate Appropriation Committees. They also met with the Federal Transit Agency. They made their case for additional funds looking into this next year. They came back very positive. They got a very good reception. They said that the feds were quite impressed that the Fort Plain BRT was on time and under budget. And as we all know, a lot of projects don't go. Did go that way, and they got a good reception, and they're hopeful that they will be able to get the federal funds that they've been asking for. I think the most active topic which ended the day had to do with the Mill Plain BRT. Specifically, a lot of discussion was made about the intersection of Chockloff and Mill Plain in the close proximity to Interstate 205. I think all of us have probably been affected by that intersection at one time or another. It gets pretty messy in the afternoon over there. They are working with engineers, traffic engineers, who have made a number of recommendations as the BRT goes into construction. And these are some of the suggestions. And I pass these on to you because, as I said, we all go through there at one time or another, and hopefully things will get better for us as motorists. The engineering firm is HDR Engineering. Some of you may be familiar with that firm. And HDR has recommended that the left turn from westbound Mill Plain to southbound Chockloff be eliminated. The management of Fred Meyer is not happy about that at all, and so they are working with C-Tran to see if there's a possible way to resolve that. The engineers have also recommended that the station or the stop not be curbside, as bus lines traditionally do. They are recommending that the station be in the median at that intersection. Another recommendation was major restriping of Mill Plain as it crosses over 205. They went through a number of examples with that. The engineering firm also had a video that they played. It was a computer image of traffic movement through that intersection if their recommended changes are put into effect. They were saying that the westbound traffic at Mill Plain and Chockloff takes about 8 minutes to get that. I'm sorry, average speed is 8 miles per hour. With their recommended changes, they feel that speed will actually increase to 18 miles per hour. That's with today's level of traffic. So as the area grows and there's more and more traffic going through that area, could come back to 8 again, but I hate to think of what it would be like if no changes are made. That was the only topic that had as much stimulating discussion as it did. I don't think there was anyone in the room who did not have a question or an answer or an explanation or all those. So it was quite lively. Changing topics. Yesterday I attended a Clark County the Community Action Board Advisory Board. We heard presentations by 11 program managers. These are managers of programs with nonprofit organizations, and the three managers were asking for $774,000 in grants. It's anticipated that about $390,000 will be made available. We did the same thing in March. So with the 2 monthly meetings combined, there were 30 presentations and by nonprofits, all requesting grants. And during this next 4-week period, a scoring process will take place. And at the May meeting, the awards of the grants will be made public. And last night was C-Tran's regular monthly meeting. There was one topic that kind of dominated most of the evening, and C-Tran has proposed a number of route changes to take effect in September. They have had 3 public open houses at this point. Last night was their public hearing. Last night the house was full. There wasn't an empty seat in the place. There were 11 members of the public that got up and spoke. Many people were present, but didn't participate in that. In addition to that, C-Tran has been bombarded with emails, and they've also received a lot of phone calls to their customer service department. And all these things have been summarized in their meeting agenda packet. If you go on their website and look at that, you can see what kinds of comments came in from people. Most of the comments were against changes. You might expect that, but everything focused. Most of the conversations focused on bus route number 39 that's proposed for elimination. And specifically, there's a stretch on 33rd Street where Route 39 goes, and a lot of people living in that area expressed their dissatisfaction with that change. The C-Tran board acknowledged that they would take the comments into consideration before things are finalized. I do have to say there were some positive comments that came out, and the positive comments had to deal with the proposed new route, which will travel, if approved, from Fisher's Landing directly over to PDX. PDX claims that 40% of their employees live on this side of the river, and both PDX and C-Tran feel that route will have a significant ridership. So it was a good meeting last night, and C-Tran hopes to finalize things at next month's meeting. There's a possibility, though, that it may go to June, but they would like to have an approval by May so they can start making plans for September changes. So there, that's all I have.
Great reports, thank you very much. Yeah, any questions for Councilmember Boff?
Was there, Doug, you and I have talked about this before, was there any conversation about replacing some of these routes like ours, which doesn't have any riders on it, with Uber or Lyft type of arrangement? You know, I was out at the Ecology town meeting, and the people who spoke out there were pretty dissatisfied with bus only coming twice a day to Ecology.
One of the changes that's proposed is increased frequency between Yakult and Battleground. Mm-hmm. And no one seemed to have a problem with that. There weren't any details available as to the frequency, but I think that may help along that way. In conjunction with what you and I spoke about, I did speak directly with Sean Donaghy. I called him when I learned about the feelings over there. And I also spoke with Council Chair Quiring as well. So she's aware of it. And well, she was definitely there, so she knows about it. But she and I chatted, and I think the C-Tran will send somebody out to have more discussions with the citizens over there.
What about in our environment here? Because every time I see our bus, there's hardly if anybody on it.
Well, that is an issue. It's a project that I want to go after to get more details on that. To answer your question, Councilmember Williams, there was no specific discussion about running the connector out here. Everything has been focused where the urban population is, and unless we make some noise, I don't think a whole lot will happen. Although I think C-Tran is at a point where they realize that there may be less costly ways of servicing this area than even running the vans out here. And this is where the Uber-type system has come up. And they're looking at it not just as a general process, they're looking at it as a way of serving seniors also. It came up at the summit for the senior group. That came up last month. So,
Okay, cool.
So-
As long as it stays in the spotlight, that's all. Thank you.
yeah. One other comment that came up from two of the board members, two of the, I call them senior board members because they've been around for a lot of years. And a comment came up about why do the large 60-foot buses have very few people on them, and why don't we see smaller buses on these routes? And there was no response to that comment when it came up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Stimmel?
No comments tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
Thanks, Mayor. Well, one of the comments I was going to bring up was about the C-Tran bus, so I'm glad that we got a chance to get that on there. You mentioned military families, that's important, and recognize them. And what is today, I'm not trying to make light of this, but today is National Hug Your Dog Day, and also National Siblings Day. But the reason I bring up Hug Your Dog is in the last utility bill, it's mentioned there's only slightly over 100 dog licenses issued in La Center. And we got more than 100 dogs. We definitely have more than 100 dogs. I know that my dog, Bella, she's pretty good, stays in the yard, wandered off one day, and before I could call the PD to see if she'd shown up down there, they were calling me because she was licensed. And she had a tag on, and bang, I got a call right away. Encourage your neighbors to get their dogs licensed, which means they have to have a rabies vaccination as well. And I mean, that's the price of admission, is that rabies vaccination. That's important. I don't think we have rabies in the area, but nevertheless, we don't want to find out the hard way. Other than that, Mayor, that's all I have tonight. Oh, the first meeting in May, I may not be here. I have an activity in Chehalis that day. I'm not sure what time it lands. I might be able to make it back in time. I might not. So just so.
Okay. Appreciate that. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I have.
Good. Councilmember Cerveny?
No comments this evening.
Okay. So next on the agenda are staff reports. We have two staff reports this evening. The first one is from Chief Denny.
Mayor, council, citizens, Chief Denny's, the Center Police Department. It's not up there, but the monthly advisor is out for April, and the first part of it is obviously we just went through, covers the life-saving award to Officer Langlois and the incident. So if you want to have that, it's for information purposes. The next item on the advisor is the drug take-back event on Saturday, April 27th. They take back unused and expired prescriptions and over-the-counter medications for safe and free disposal to designated drug take-back locations in Southwest Washington. Prescriptions and over-the-counter medication, including pills, liquids, and inhalers, and will be accepted. Medications may remain in original containers, and labels do not need to be removed. Medications not in original containers will be accepted also. As you can see by the various locations up there, who's doing them and what they're taking back, as far as some of them are taking back sharps and syringes and some aren't. So if you have sharps and syringes, please take it to the designated locations. And just for information, as always, we take back we do the Dead Drug Take Back program every day of the year, so at the office. As far as the next thing on here is the stats for the Center Police Department. As you can see, a majority of their work was premise checks this go around. We did 49 patrol emphases as well, and 131 traffic stops, and that's with actually 5 officers, if you can think about it, because the sergeants are not included in the patrol stats usually. So that's the officers out there that are working for you and doing those checks. And so And with that in regard, we did have a distracted driving emphasis yesterday. I don't know if anybody got stopped in the room, but there was, unfortunately, a lot of stops made on La Center Road and in La Center for distracted driving, and that was emphasis on the old cell phones in people's hands while they're driving, and there was a lot of stops made. Suspended license was also found, and a few other things as well, but majority of the stops was, I think they made 121 stops just yesterday with the officers that came in, and it was all for distracted driving. So, and I think Battle Ground, they had a good bust with theirs. They made a traffic stop on a vehicle with 1 pound of meth in the vehicle. So don't drive your vehicle with meth in there and distracted on your phone. It's not a good thing. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Good report.
So, next report we have is from our Public Works Manager, Matt Jenkins.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens. This month's Public Works Operations Report, just to briefly go over it, staff's been working to repair crosswalk lights at 18th and Aspen. It's been on the frizz. They're working with the vendor currently to try to get that corrected. There'll also be street sweeping for the next 2 weeks, so if you see the sweeper out there, please encourage your neighbors to obey the lights and the flashing warnings. The Riverside project on the west side of town, the contractor's almost complete installing the sewer and storm lines for phase 1. We've been inspecting those, and they're doing an excellent job from the contractor's standpoint on those installs and the way they're going about that project. As far as projects go, Public Works has completed the first phase landscaping behind the current admin building, which is the old bank building. They'll be installing plants, split rail fencing, which they've already started to install there to spruce it up. And they'll also be modifying, when they're done with that, the water feature and the landscaping work next to the sign, the new sign. They'll have to modify the pumps, relocate them, because there's a problem there with the way the pumps are operating. But it should be a relatively simple fix when they get their hands on it. On the wastewater operations side, as far as MPDS permit compliance, the treatment plant continues to operate well within the NPDES permit limits, achieving removal rates of over 99%. Ecology has transitioned to an electronic format for submitting our biosolids report annually. The problem is they converted to it before it was complete, so we're in a wait and see mode until they actually have an interface to where we can submit a report. So I'm staying in constant contact with the biosolids department, with Ecology, and as soon as we have a way to submit a report electronically, we'll get that in. The report is complete, though. The DMR for March is complete. We're in 100% compliance across the board. On the maintenance side, the wastewater operators continue to seek out areas of inflow and infiltration throughout the wastewater system, take advantage of some of our rainy days to look for areas that the water's coming into our sanitary sewer system. They're also performing annual services and inspections on several pieces of equipment throughout the plant this month that come up in the annuals. And then on the collection side, the operators replaced a failed pump at the Lockwood Creek Lift Station, which we also call Lift Station 3. The failed pump was installed in 1996 by Clark Public Utilities. Well past its useful life. Staff was able to modify an existing spare pump to install in the station, which resulted in a low-cost, high-reliability replacement. So that is my report. Are there any questions?
Matt, do you usually wait till those lift station pumps fail before you replace them, or do you replace them on the schedule?
That's a great question. We normally don't. We usually schedule them for capital replacement. The problem is those pumps were very specific. They were obsolete about 5 years ago. That lift station's due to be upgraded as development comes in and upsized. So we thought there was enough useful life in them left to bridge the gap, because we're talking 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, we kept an eye on it and we had a plan in place. So
Cool. Thank you.
yeah.
Matt, with the increasing rainfall and the snow melt, are you seeing any problems with any of the local streets?
We haven't seen any. the operations staff does a good job of keeping the catch basins clear. That's part of the street sweeping program, and trying to keep the storm system from backflowing and keeping the culverts clean. So, but we do rely on citizens to report those and try to address them immediately.
Great. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Good report.
Great.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the citizens' public comment. If anyone would like to address the council, please step up to the podium and give us your name and address, and if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes. As for anything that's not on the agenda this evening.
Dennis Hill, 1316 West Alder Place, Mayor, Council, citizens. I just want to, again, personal recognition to thank you. I've already personally thanked Chief Denny for his team. Some of you know that we were gone for 3 months, and our granddaughter was holding on to fort for us in our home. First time alone, taking care of a property, and I alerted her and also the police department that she was there on her. She's working, but still single. And just the fact that she felt good about having someone track by. And what reminded me was when I got back from our trip, a couple weeks later, I got my 3-page report. Some of you know what this. Some of you might have 2 pages or 1 page or a half a page. But mine was like 3 pages, which basically say that the officers going by notated. And I didn't request them to go in the backyard, but they visually did it, checked, and all was well, and they noted that. And I appreciate that. And I think, again, we're very fortunate to live in a city that has that kind of a police presence and friendliness and openness to reach out to citizens. So again, thank you, Chief, and your team.
Thank you.
Chris Leesburg, 217 East, 17th Place, here in the center. I was here last meeting about the bacteria in the rivers and streams, and I've been busy calling, making lots of calls, trying to figure out who is responsible for alerting the public for high levels of bacteria in the streams where people are swimming in the swimming holes, and haven't got a real clear answer, but I'm leaning towards the Department of Ecology. But I would like to see the city get involved too. I just would like to see some signs letting the public know that there are high levels of bacteria in some of those swimming holes during the dry season. Just to give you an idea of how high the numbers are supposed to be, around 100 to be safe, and in some of these areas they are 5,800. And this is just like in Breezy, Jenny Creek, McCormick Creek, the East Fork of the Lewis River, Paradise Point, where lots of people are swimming, and that's a state park. So I'm not really sure why that hasn't already been reported over the last 13 years, because they've been monitoring it for that long. So anyway, I'm still trying to figure out who and how I'm going to get that done, but I think it should be done before the warm weather gets here. So anyway.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah, so you may want to, we do have a representative here this
Right.
evening from Department of Ecology, Devan Rosterfer. She'll be talking right after the public comment, so you might want to stay for that. Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'm Jim Irish, 1653 East Heritage Loop, the Center, Washington. Mayor and City Council, primarily Councilmember Williams. Mayor Dorian and I were primary in getting the connector restored to, or C-Trans service restored to the city of the Center and the city of Ridgefield. Previous to 2000, I think it was about 1996, the center had a fixed route. And it used to come out here, and it made 2 things available. Number one is it was a fixed route. We only had less than 1,000 people here at the time, registered voters. But it made them eligible for C-VAN. they are not eligible for CBAN if you take away the connector. That's one of the options that we were able to put into the connector. That is a very strong point. We may not have that many people riding it, but we have a lot of elder citizens, and I'm one of them, that could possibly need CBAN, excuse me, and have the medical alert use. So by having our connector service here, besides giving an excellent service to the community, and the possibility of reestablishing the city of the center as a fixed route with a fixed route, so that they could have service to ALNA, that stopping out there. We have a lot to be thankful for in having the connector. And so I just wanted to bring that out, that the connector means an awful lot, not just because it has a smaller bus or an empty bus every now and then, because it has 2 runs in the morning, 2 runs at night, and 1 in the afternoon, in which we share with Ridgefield for people that have doctor appointments, et cetera. That we, good idea that we could have a midday run. So what I wanted to just say is that you can pass on to the C-TRAN board from an old board attendee that we're very pleased that they continue to have the seat connector out here. And it's a good thing to ride, in case you haven't lately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Al Philo, 152 West 15th Street. Hey, what about that reader board? Isn't that great? You know, I posted about, I'm a member of the American Legion, and I posted that we were having our meeting tomorrow night. And whoever put it together, I just expected, you know, to have, you know, the date and time at the church. And, you know, but somebody went to all the trouble to put the American Legion emblem on the side. That's going the extra effort. And, you know, it means a lot to see something like that. Somebody put a little extra effort, you know, to make it look nice. And who knows, you know, maybe it'll draw some people in, because if you're a veteran and you're not a member of the American Legion, we sure would like to see you there tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seth.
Okay, with that, I'll close citizens' public comment. Next on the agenda, we do have a presentation this evening. We have Devan Rosterfer with the Washington Department of Ecology, and she's here to talk about stormwater and Lewis River quality work and outreach. So welcome, Devan. Thank you for being here this evening, and we're anxious to hear your presentation.
Yeah, and thank you to the City of La Center, to you, Mayor, council members, and La Center staff, and also to Chris for talking to me and inviting me here to tonight's meeting to talk about the East Fork Lewis River, because I feel very passionate about it. So my name is Devan Rosterfer, and I'm a water quality specialist for the Department of Ecology, and I work out of the Vancouver field office, and I am the staff person that is leading the water cleanup planning effort in the East Fork Lewis River. So really what I'm going to focus on today is giving you an overview of what we've been working on and why we're in the East Fork Lewis River, and then at the end, if we have time for a couple of questions from the council members, I'd be happy to address those and follow up with anyone afterwards. I have business cards, and I'm happy to talk on the phone or meet in person if you'd like to know more. So, the East Fork Lewis River is on the state's polluted waters list for bacteria and temperature impairments. The East Fork Lewis River was initially sampled by Ecology in 2005 and 2006, and it was determined then that there was a fecal coliform bacteria and temperature problem in the river. Follow-up sampling was completed in 2017 on fecal coliform bacteria, and it was determined that the issues were still persisting and in some areas had gotten worse. Some areas there weren't issues anymore, but because of the sampling results, a source assessment was published in 2018 on bacteria and temperature impairments, and this can be found online if you're interested in learning more. And what this source assessment does is prioritized critical areas for addressing bacteria and temperature issues, and it also recommended some implementation actions that could be taken and put in on the ground at the programmatic or project level that could help work towards better water quality in the East Fork Lewis River. And why we really care about this river is because it supports recreational uses for kayakers, swimmers, fishers, picnickers. I personally I spent a lot of time swimming and paddling in the East Fork this summer, and also temperature, because the East Fork supports endangered salmonid species. So from the source assessment, we were able to prioritize areas for our focus, because as we all know, we're busy people, we have to prioritize where we work. And for bacteria work, we have prioritized the lower and middle watershed for working collaboratively with county and local government, and also private landowners and state and federal government as well, on putting in projects and doing some public education and outreach that can work towards lowering bacteria. So where there are priority bacteria issues are in Breezy Creek, where we are now, and also in McCormick Creek. Other areas where we have prioritized for bacteria-related work are Riley and Lockwood Creeks, and also Rock Creek North. And just to provide some more context on Breezy Creek, the sampling was done in 2005 and 2006, and also in 2017, like I said, and all of the samples that were collected were over the target for bacteria. We have water quality standards that function to support recreational uses, and all samples collected were over. But I will say there are a lot of places in Clark County and Washington, across the United States and across the world, that have the same issues. Bacteria is a pretty common water quality issue, but there are things that can be done to make progress towards reducing bacteria. So to address bacteria, some of the things that we've been focusing on are stormwater related work. Some things that can be done are working on illicit discharge detection and elimination, and we've started having some conversations about stormwater opportunities. We've also started doing some non-point source outreach, since there are other sources of bacteria, including dogs, wildlife, and small acreage agriculture and livestock that can contribute to bacteria issues. And we've also been working with Clark County Public Health about septic system related issues, and trying to quantify and understand what the extent of the septic systems are, and whether or not they're up to date on inspection or could benefit from correction or outreach on maintenance. And there are some existing inspection programs and private landowner workshops, and I believe there's actually one going to be held in December by Washington State University Extension Inlet Center. So if you're interested in learning how to inspect your own septic system, there is an opportunity coming down the road for people in the center if you're interested, and I can tell you more about that later if you want. But to really start working towards fixing the issue, we kicked off a partnership in August of 2018, which is a collaboration of local, state, tribal, federal governments, watershed groups, and nonprofits that we are working with to collaboratively develop and implement a water cleanup plan. And I can say that the partnership meetings have been well attended. We had 48 people at our last meeting, representing a wide variety of agencies. We also had some private landowners there. I think that's how Chris actually initially heard about the issues in the East Fork Lewis River. And I just wanted to thank the City of La Center, because you've been an early partner. I remember I met early on with you, Mayor, with you, Matt, and other staff, and it's been there's been a lot of information sharing, a lot of talk about opportunities, and we have had meetings about the technical assistance we can provide, and also funding that we can provide for planning, utility development, potential stormwater investment projects. We're here to help. So I guess my final message would be is that addressing this issue is a long-term process. It's a shared responsibility. It's our responsibility. I mean, I work on this 40 hours a week. I care very much about it. It's county responsibility. County has shared jurisdiction in the watershed and in Breezy Creek. City of La Center, you have jurisdiction as well. But also we need private landowners to get involved, because it's difficult to make progress without private landowner investment in septic systems or private landowners being willing to take necessary steps to keep their cows out of the creek or to work on better manure management practices on private property. So some next steps. On May 15th, we're having a grant project development workshop targeted towards people that are eligible for ecology funding. So that would be nonprofits or governments that could take on or are interested in seeking funding resources from ecology related to the water quality issues in the East Fork. We're also planning a public town hall, which is tentatively scheduled for June 3rd. And our goal for that public town hall is to educate the public, but also to get people to sign up to have technical assistance and maybe someone come visit their property to help them plan and understand where individuals can take action to improve water quality in the East Fork Lewis River. So there's a lot of work to do. It's a shared responsibility. It'll take shared investment and shared implementation. And I just wanted to thank everyone and really thank the City of La Center because you are a small municipality. I know you've had lots of changes in staff, but my take is that you've been a really willing partner very early on, and you've listened, you've shared, and I just look forward to continuing to work with you and really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. So happy to take any questions if you have them.
Yeah, Devan, I've got a question if I may. I see in the summertime, I see a lot of activity in the East Fork down here. I don't know how familiar you are with the center, but we got the bridge and the river, and there's a lot of recreational activity.
Yes.
Down there. A lot of kids are out there in the summertime. So, with this in mind, is the river through the center, does it meet recreational water quality standards?
Okay, so what I can say is that the only main stem East Fork Lewis River site that did not meet bacteria water quality standards was at Paradise Point. So we did not monitor, though, any main stem sites near the City of La Center. Our main monitoring points were in Breezy Creek, one being at some stormwater outfalls, and then further up in the creek towards more residential areas. Okay. So I can't necessarily comment on that.
Where would I be able to get those reports so I can see those numbers?
It's all online. I'd be happy to send you a copy if you want to give me your email or send you a link.
I'll give you I'll let you know. Thank you.
I'd be happy to.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm curious about signage.
Yeah.
The resident mentioned who's responsible for doing that. I don't know how we would, not knowing the specifics, we don't do testing, things like that. Who would do that?
So again, shared responsibility is the theme. Part of this process and the water cleanup planning process is developing a public education and outreach campaign that will identify how do we educate governments, how do we educate and get watershed groups on board, farmers, how do we educate private landowners. As far as who's responsible for putting up a sign, I mean, I don't think that that's really up to who would ever would want to do that. I mean, it's not, we won't be putting up any signage. I would usually lean to Clark County Public Health to talk more specifically about how they put up signage at public swimming areas that are designated swimming areas. But if there is interest from the City of La Center on having, whether it's like a one-pager or a pamphlet on water quality in the East Fork, and to help if any residents are interested in knowing more, we're happy to facilitate providing education on water quality. That education will probably be more focused on individual actions that people can take to make progress towards improving water quality. Or targeting outreach on programs to actually fix issues.
I do have a follow-up question. Yeah. You said the sample collected at Paradise Point had high levels. When was that sample taken?
Our last fecal coliform sampling was in 2017. What I can say is that Clark County is currently monitoring in the East Fork Lewis River. They're mainly doing tributary sites, not main stem sites, but they'll be putting out a stream health report in 2020 that summarizes those water quality results. And they've been monitoring in the East Fork for even longer and more frequently than Ecology has.
Thank you.
You said you swim in the East Fork.
I do.
Do you think that maybe the frequency of these reports and the signage should be stepped up into the public areas? I mean, as Chris brought up, I know Patrick's Point, Paradise Point, obviously there's people who go there. I know my daughter used to go down here under the bridge with other high school kids and swim out there. I had no idea that water was not exactly pristine. And do we, it sounds like nobody wants to do it, and they don't want to do it very often.
Nobody wants to do what, sorry?
Put up signage.
Well, I think that's a discussion. How to educate the public and raise awareness is important. I think how that is done is still open for discussion, and whatever works best for governments and however the level of education or the outreach methods desired. I swim in the East Fork because I think it's a beautiful river, and I wouldn't ever want anyone to be scared of the resource because I think it's lovely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
No.
So I'm a little confused. You swim in the East Fork.
Yeah.
So what signage would jurisdiction put up? I mean,
I would prefer to have this conversation probably offline because it's a little outside of my scope of work. Signage, if that's desired, we can have a meeting about signage and talk about some messaging. However, I would want that to be a locally led discussion. We would encourage more public education and outreach and help facilitate that watershed-wide. But however you feel is most appropriate to educate your residents really is your local decision.
I think the frequency needs to be increased, and I mean, this time of year, nobody's going to get in that water, but come once,
I wouldn't say nobody.
Yeah, well, somebody might, but anyway, during the warmer seasons, when people are down there using the river, and obviously the flows are lower, so probably contamination levels might change. I think that's when the sampling needs to be taken and publicized at that point. Portland certainly lets you know when the Willamette River is dirtier than normal, and it makes the news. Now, granted, we don't need to make the news, but I think if our kids are going down here and jumping in the pond or in the river, probably that would be the time to put up the signs. The water's not clean right now. Putting something in the sewer bill, a one-pager, that's nice too. Parents might read that, but it doesn't necessarily get to the real end users, where the high school kids, or middle school kids that go down there in the summertime. And that, I think it needs to be more current as, on a maybe a bi-weekly basis or something like that, during the summer months when people are using the river.
I appreciate that you feel passionately about this and that clearly there's more discussion to be had, and I would be happy to participate in those discussions and bring other people to the table that can help think about implementing solutions or signage or other education and outreach actions.
Mayor, maybe we could schedule a work session before a council meeting and invite some of these folks.
yeah, I mean, we can do that. I just, yeah, absolutely. It just, again, I'm still hearing mixed messages here. I mean, is the East Fork, is that water quality such that you can use it for recreational swimming?
I can't comment on that. What I can say is that what we've measured is labeled in the report in the tributaries is over the water quality standard that we recommend for recreational use, which is 100 CFU, which is colony forming units per 100 mil. We are not meeting water quality standards in the lower watershed for bacteria. What I do know, though, is the only main stem site that we've measured that did not meet that standard was at Paradise Point.
Okay.
Well, there can't be much difference between Paradise Point and under the
Right,
bridge.
no, exactly. So,
Yeah.
okay, very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
happy to meet offline. I'm also happy to work closely with staff too, and continuing to be a resource, and to also talk about funding opportunities, because there are funding opportunities for stormwater education as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, next on the agenda, under ordinances, resolutions, and public hearings, we do have a public hearing this evening on the Center Municipal Code 18-282, outdoor lighting. This evening, one of the Center's planning commissioners will give a presentation on outdoor lighting. We also have two other representatives from the Planning Commission this evening. Diana McLean, the chair of the Planning Commission, is here, as well as Dennis Hill. So after that, we'll get a staff report from Mr. Eisman, and we'll move through the process.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
Council, citizens, I'm Dennis Nutbrock from your Planning Commission. Tonight, Mr. Eisman and I are going to give a brief overview of the outdoor lighting code that the Planning Commission is recommending for adoption. This outdoor lighting code was a major initiative for the Planning Commission this last year. It should be noted that currently the city does not have any regulations governing lighting on private property to include commercial, industrial, anything of that nature. There's an engineering standard that does cover lighting of public streets. So your street lights are covered by an engineering standard. When the Planning Commission started this, we were really, our initial focus was on how do we prevent the continued deterioration of our dark skies. But as we got into this, we realized there were many other issues that need to be addressed, particularly in light pollution. And so our objective was to investigate different methods for regulating outdoor lighting and to investigate methods for mitigating the adverse effects of outdoor lighting. That resulted in a new chapter in Title 18 for outdoor lighting, and we also added 21 terms to the definition section in Title 18 that were necessary for the outdoor lighting. Those two sections of code are what are the subjects of tonight's public hearing. The Planning Commission concluded our work in October of last year with a public hearing, and just a month ago we held a work session with the City Council on this code. You know, there's lots of elements of adverse effects of outdoor lighting. If you think of lighting for safety and security, one of the things we found that glare from lighting, from improperly shielded lighting, can have an adverse effect on safety and security, as depicted in this somewhat simplistic example. But on the left you can see a house light that is unshielded, has lots of glare. If you're standing there, you probably can't see a person standing at the gate. But once you take that glare out of your vision, lo and behold, there's somebody standing there. So what that glare is doing is reducing your visual acuity at night and preventing you from seeing into shadows. Other elements of why we want to control outdoor lighting is to minimize what's called light trespass and intrusive lighting. You can think of light trespass as the light shining in your bedroom window at night that annoys you, or in your neighbor's light that's shining in your living room and you don't want a light there. That's considered light trespass. It's well, I think everybody understands circadian rhythms. You know, that day-night rhythm governs just about all life-sustaining behaviors of both plants and animals, including ourselves. And artificial lighting has been demonstrated to can be disruptive to those critical rhythms and can have adverse effects on animal life. I just saw a article in National Geographic that says 80% of Americans currently live in a location where they can't see the Milky Way. You know, that may not seem like a big deal, but not to get too so philosophical here. You know, the nighttime environment can be considered a natural resource. It's important to us, you know, for the reason I just talked about, night-day rhythms. But it's also a resource that we ought to appreciate. You know, for as long as man's been on Earth, you know, experiencing that night sky has been a source of inspiration and awe. And we are rapidly losing that dark sky and the resource it provides. Excessive outdoor lighting causes light pollution and wasted energy. About 30% of outdoor lighting provides no benefit. That's light that's going straight up in the sky or light that's going out towards the horizon that isn't lighting the things on the ground that you're interested in lighting. So that's a huge waste of energy. And new technology can also save energy with LED lighting, which you've seen in the city. We just this last year converted most of the street lights to LED. So our objective was to have a successful regulation that will prevent waste and harmful lighting while providing adequate lighting on the ground where it's needed. And I think we've satisfied those objectives. Here are the objectives for the code, right out of the code. Right at the top is to minimize obtrusive lighting, but still balancing the lighting you need for nighttime security, safety, utility, the enjoyment of public spaces, and for commerce. We have, with the center bottoms and a lot of our critical areas, we have a significant wildlife resource. And so the code wanted to recognize that we need to protect those areas from the adverse effects of artificial night lighting. We do have some streetscapes. We hope to have more streetscapes when we get out the junction. And we recognize that it requires a specific type of lighting that will enhance those public spaces, and the code allows for that kind of thing to happen. And we talked about energy conservation and decreasing the use of poorly shielded or inadequately shielded lights. Our approach was, in the Planning Commission, was to look at lighting codes from other cities as examples. We did find 3 model lighting codes. These codes are put out by various organizations. They're intended to be a template that municipalities can apply to their cities and modify them to meet the specific needs. We elected to use the model lighting ordinance light as our template. This model code was a result of a joint effort between the International Dark Skies Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society. It was their 2nd or 3rd generation model code, and it incorporated considerable research and years of experience in minimizing the adverse effects of night lighting. So that was the source of our code. The code regulates outdoor lighting on any private property. So that includes any commercial, industrial, and new residential. As I mentioned earlier, the street lights are controlled by our engineering standard. The new lighting code is applicable to all new land uses, developments, and buildings that require a city permit. So if somebody's putting a new use, this code applies if a city permit is required for that addition. Additionally, any modifications to non-residential uses that result in 25% increase in floor area or parking space brings this code into action. And any modification or replacement outdoor lighting constitutes more than 25% of the permitted lumens on that parcel. Now, this also does cover residential. I know there's been some concerns voiced about that, but let me emphasize the code only applies to new dwellings approved after this code is enacted. And what the code requires on those new residential is shielded luminaires that prevent uplight and reduce the amount of glare. And there's also a maximum luminous flux or lumens for fixtures on those homes. This requirement applies at initial construction. And again, to emphasize, the lighting code does not apply to existing homes. The Planning Commission has talked about an outreach program where we'd like to provide information to current residents so they can be aware of the choices they make if they replace lights, so they might make a more informed choice. But that would be entirely up to the residents. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Eric. He wants to we'll give a brief summary of the process and some of the code.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and citizens. Mayor Geisman, your planning consultant on this process here. Again, the Planning Commission was trying to make sure that this proposed lighting code does not affect current residents and their current homes. And so we're not setting up any kind of an enforcement police. There's no czar that's being proposed. There's no panel that's going to go out and inspect your homes in your different neighborhoods. That's not the point. The point is that we have over 800 units that are proposed for development within the city of La Center that are coming forward with either approved subdivisions or that are in the process right now of being approved. We heard early on that people were concerned as they come into town that you could see the bare hills that have been graded and the new streets that are being put in and the standards for the lights are being placed there and the sky is changing in the city of La Center when you're coming in at night. So this code was designed to look at new residential developments and subdivisions, new commercial development, and new industrial development. So the question then is, if we're not setting up commissions and czars and those kinds of things, how do we enforce this code? How do we administer this code would be the real question. So as Dennis said, Mr. Nutbrock said, is that this will come forward, we will look at new development applications. So for example, a project comes forward, we go through the pre-app process, applicant decides that they want to build a new subdivision, a new commercial or a new industrial facility that's in the community, planned for the zone that it's in. At the time of land use approval, we would impose these conditions, just like we would say, you have to meet the park standards, you have to meet the parking standards, and so on and so forth. You have to meet the lighting standards. The development that comes forward would then produce a photometric plan, or they would provide us with cut sheets or industry-specific information to show that they would meet that code. Your planning staff or your building department staff would then, at the planning level, your planning staff or consultants would make sure that the proposal is consistent with the code at a conceptual level. At the time of building permit approval, your building officials would take a look at the lighting plan that's proposed to make sure that it meets the code. It's the same thing that happens all the time with any kind of building permit process right now. You look at the code, you look at the building code, you look at the planning code, and it has to be implemented as a condition of approval in order to get the occupancy permit. So that's the process that's there. We aren't setting up a new process at all. We're using our existing land use approval processes and our existing building permit processes. So from our perspective, we don't believe it creates an additional burden or a new burden, if you will, on development that isn't already anticipated how we're going to review it. If we could go, I guess I could get us to the second page here. There we go. So some of the key points that we do want to also emphasize is that we're creating 3 different lighting zones, the LZ 0, 1, and 2. And the 0 is where you would have the least amount of light. For example, in the bottomlands, in wetlands, in stream corridor areas, or other critical areas that are protected there. That's where the lowest level of light would be anticipated. The LZ1 is predominantly the mixed use, the residential zone. So when new subdivisions come forward, there's a standard in the code that those subdivisions would have to meet. And then the LZ2, it's more for the industrial area or the commercial downtown. When new development comes in, they would then have to meet those lighting standards as well. There's a mechanism in the code to evaluate or to assign, if you will, the amount of lighting that's available. You can do it through the parking space method or through the hardscape method, but the code's specific and tells you what the levels are that you can develop. There we go. Keep going. And as Dennis has mentioned before, we are using the IES bug rating system to deal with backlighting, uplighting, and glare. So this is a system that's used in other jurisdictions and not something new that we're inventing here in the city of La Center. So the implementation of that should be fairly simple. I've already identified the special the process, but there are also in the code special provisions to allow things such as nighttime football games at athletic fields. There's no regulation, for example, on Christmas lights at all. They're specifically exempted from that. There's no regulation on small lights that allow you to come into your driveway. But we do allow for special permits for major events where significant lighting might be appreciated. I put it that way. So with that, that's how the code works. We think it's an easier process to administer using your existing processes right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Eric, in the language you refer to regulatory authority, and I guess my question goes back to if someone were to file a complaint or make a question about neighboring lighting, how is that measured? Is there a tool or what equipment?
Wonderful question. The review authority, that was the term that we're using here, is the same term we use in other land use codes. That's your planning staff or your building staff. If a complaint is filed and it's on an existing building that predates this code, there's no action that the city would take whatsoever. If, however, it's a new development that's subject to this code and a complaint is filed, and they have to be written complaints, we would most likely have to look at the lighting fixture itself to see that it is cut off, has a cutoff, to see that it meets the standards. The fixture itself would identify what those standards are. We're not measuring light trespass at property lines, but we'd be looking at the fixture itself. And again, it's a new structure that postdates this code.
I have a question for Dennis. You said there would possibly be some outreach. Would there be any outreach towards the county for the county maintained lights to try to bring them in compliance like on 18th?
We had not talked about that. It's certainly something we could do. On 18th.
I think, yeah, the ones on 18th, at Aspen or the Globe, they're just glass jars.
Yeah, we have those throughout the city, and that's, as I told you before, that's what we're trying to get rid of. But that's a huge investment. I mean, it's a policy question. If the city wants to replace those, we're going to require a different type as we move forward.
Are those, I thought those were PUD lights. They got bands on them with numbers on them.
Well, as I understand, there's some that are in the city, there are some that are they're all maintained by the county except for a lighting district up on the hill someplace.
May I add?
But they are city-owned poles. The city owns the pole and the fixture. The county, the PUD maintains them for us. And we pay them.
So we're going to have a bake sale?
We did talk, if I may, we did talk to the county, and they are working on dark sky compliant lights. So like Cobra Heads are already dark sky compliant. The Acorn lights are not yet, but it is something that they're considering.
Okay.
A way to do that sometime in the future.
But if you remember, the ones that we are put in engineering standards for going forward are dark sky compliant.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
A couple questions for whoever's appropriate for this. The ratings on your lumens, for example, on a hardscape, is that measured at the surface?
No. Lumens is when you buy a light bulb, it'll say so many lumens on it. That's the initial lumens. And so what we're totaling up there is the initial lumens that bulb is rated, that fixture is rated at.
Okay, so I'm looking at 490 for parking space for hardscape method, and then on residential lighting, I see 1260. I don't know how to relate to 1260 to a 60-watt bulb, for example.
Funny you should ask. 800 lumens is about a 60-watt bulb.
Okay.
60 watt incandescent.
60 watt incandescent.
Okay. 800 lumens.
I
Okay.
knew that was coming.
Okay. Another question for you. I heard Mr. Eisman say that uplighting is discouraged at this.
It's prohibited in most cases.
Okay. We have a new residential development. We have someone that wants to fly this American flag flag code calls for lighting a flag at night. I've got two neighbors that light their flags. Both have floodlights. One is solar operated, one's operated from this junction box. And they're directed upward. Would that be allowed in the new, with this code?
The code is silent on that, so yes, it would be. We would, through an outreach, we'd like to explain to people the impacts of doing that, but it's certainly not prohibited.
Would be permitted.
Did you say the
She
light?
was dying to get up there.
A floodlight.
Repeat what you said, please.
A floodlight directed upward in that scenario. Would that be,
It is,
the code is silent on that?
code is silent on it.
And also for,
I just want to give your name and
oh, Dinah.
for the record,
Chair of the
Sure.
Planning Commission. For the flags too, well, actually, one of the people on the city council member has a flag and it's actually downlit. You can get a solar light that lights the flag from the top going down. So there are options to that, so that would be part of public outreach. And of course, the existing structures, they're grandfathered in, so to speak.
I would add something to that also. If I were asked that question as a way to interpret the code in a professional capacity, I would look at the code, the exemption section of the code, and see that lighting solely for signs which are regulated by chapter 8.60 are exempt. And in 8.60, which is not a land use code, flags are an exempt sign, if you will, because it's a form of speech. The sign is a form of speech. And so I would say that flagpole lighting, when I read the two codes together, is not something the city recommends. See it as a form, the flag is a form of speech. Speech of that is protected. It's not regulated under the sign code. The lighting code says that we don't regulate signs that are not lighting on signs that are not regulated.
Okay.
I think you also see the city prosecutor refraining from prosecuting in these instances. I'm just guessing here, but.
Okay.
Not out to make any trouble.
One last question regarding the full cutoff fixtures. I like the effect that we have over the bridge. Granted, that's a different type of fixture. It's a shepherd's hook, I believe. It's a nice effect. You can see that the light is being directed downward, the way it should be. With the proposed fixture, which I believe was shown at the Ordinance Festival, has anyone visited a development that has those installed?
I don't think we have found one that we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis, do you think that you foresee any grant programs where fixtures could be replaced on residences? I mean, much like the energy conservation ones where, pulling incandescent lights, putting compact fluorescents, now they're pulling those and putting in LEDs.
I'm personally not aware. That doesn't mean they don't exist. But, we just went through the effort to replace all of our streetlights with LEDs, so that investment has already been made.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is things with the acorns, there are things you can do with outside shields. There's specific complaints against light trespassing.
Mm-hmm.
Those shields can be installed. I don't know if the city has the resources to do that, but that is a provision that we can put in place.
Hi, and apparently Cart Public Utility does have like a incentive program for upgrading lights. So just want to throw that in there.
We could look into that.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. I think they upgraded one on 18th. There was one that was on all the time, and I saw a guy working on it, and it's a little different color now, so it may have been upgraded with a LED, and it may have a shield in it because it's right next to the house. It's at the end of the walk trail that crosses over to Heritage Park. The light that's closest to the 18th end. Something to look at on the way home. Yeah, top of your list.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
both.
thank you.
Good presentation. So, any other discussion by the council before I open up the public hearing? Okay, so at 7:55, I'll open up for public hearing. If anyone would like to address the council, please step up to the podium. And if you give us your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
This is public hearing regarding what's just been read. Hi. I'm short.
Put it down on the
Hopefully
lower
you can
level.
hear me.
Put it down.
So my name is Simone Auger, and I'm a resident here in La Center, outside of the city, but I just came to here. I'm a lighting specialist with the Energy Trust of Oregon, and I work in the Utility Incentive Program. And so you had mentioned the rebates that you were looking for money. There is money available through the utility program here in Clark County through Clark Public Utilities. That's for commercial applications. And I can give the folks the information that they might need. I'm also the president of IES Portland section. So IES was mentioned. I can probably help with finding some case studies of example projects that you might enjoy seeing in terms of slides and any other applicable visuals that might help with that. So this is a very good, well-written ordinance, and I am just really happy to see this happen. I've been wondering about this and actually wanted to bring it to your attention, and I think they did just a fabulous job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me see what I got here.
Okay, seeing no one else stepping up to the microphone, I'll close the public hearing at 7:57. Open it back up to the council for discussion.
I think we need to continue discussing this. So
Okay.
I move that we table this topic temporarily so that we can have some more discussion on it before we go forward.
Your second?
What do you want to discuss?
The proposed code.
I know we have a council member that wanted to be a part of the discussions.
Yeah.
Plus, we're short of council.
Yeah. Tom was hoping to be here for the...
Okay, yeah.
So just postponing it until the next meeting.
Or until we can schedule time to get together, whether it be a work session or next meeting.
Yeah, we can continue
I'm
it
fine
over.
with either one.
I think we can continue it over. We won't, just continue the public hearing until next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will that work?
Sure. And this, and if you scroll all the way down to this, the motion number needs to be put in there. Not on the thing I'm looking at. The staff report doesn't have a motion number in it.
Okay.
This clarification, all the way at the end.
Just read the title.
Is it in the title?
The lighting code, but it doesn't have, when you look here at the end. Anyway,
No, it's
see where it
not.
says 2019-XXX?
It's the adult uses ordinance.
Okay, so there is a motion to continue this over to the next city council meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you again, Dennis and Eric.
I think we're on the right
Good job.
track.
Getting there.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
Let's see. Next on the agenda, we have another ordinance. It's for selection of the official city newspaper. And Dustin Bailey, finance manager, will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This ordinance is much more simple than the one that you just listened to. But ordinance 2019-11 is related to the official city paper. And just to give you a little bit of background, cities in the state of Washington are required under revised Code of Washington 35-21-875 to designate an official newspaper for public notifications. The newspaper shall be used for official publications, be of general circulation in the city, and have the qualifications prescribed in RCW Chapter 65.16. So there's two newspapers for the city of La Center that fulfill these requirements. The Columbian, which publishes daily, and the Reflector that publishes weekly. Ordinance 2009-18 established the official paper for the city of La Center as the Reflector. So the city has been operating as the Reflector, with the Reflector as the official newspaper since 2009, and there's frequent issues logistically related to getting information to the Reflector in a timely manner for publication. Staff's proposing moving the official city publications to the Columbian because it publishes daily, providing greater flexibility for staff to prepare public notifications and to ensure the proper and timely execution or circulation of information to the La Center citizens. There's going to be very little to no budget impact on this action, so the staff is recommending the council approve Ordinance 2019-11. Are there any questions?
Dustin, I do have a question. I think, yeah, it makes sense to work with a newspaper that is published daily, because in fact, I've seen situations, especially when it was on the planning commission, dealing with a weekly publication has some challenges.
Yes.
Cost-wise, how do I guess newspapers are still charging by the column inch. It used to be that way. How close are the two newspapers?
They're very close. The cost is going to be nominal
You say,
difference.
I mean, you know,
I don't have the exact number for
Yeah.
you. I didn't bring that, but yeah, it's not much of a difference. We would still be moving. Typically, when we publish things like RFQs and RFPs, we use both newspapers anyway. So that cost is going to be exactly the same. We would do the same moving forward. This would be simply for things like public hearings and agenda publications, things like that.
It makes sense. You've got to be responsive to issues. And it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Other questions?
Very good.
Printed press is going to be going.
Unfortunately, the issues with printed press does not change the revitals watching, and so we still have to have a newspaper of some kind. But yeah, I have a feeling that things will change eventually. But
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other discussion or comments by the council?
Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 2019-11 establishing the Columbian as the official newspaper of the city of La Center, which will take effect immediately upon passage.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 2019-11 establishing the Columbian as the official newspaper for the city of La Center. Being that it's an ordinance, could I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Boff?
Yes.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Councilmember Cerveny?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you. So we have one other item on the agenda this evening. It's regarding the live scan system, and Dustin Bailey, Finance Manager, will be presenting.
thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm not going to go through the background because you already heard about the background on the system. The reason this is in front of you again is through the process of ordering the system from the awarded vendor DataWorks Plus, Chief Denny and I noted that several pieces of equipment were not included in the price, although we originally thought it was. So we went back to the drawing board and reevaluated the three vendors that we requested bids from, and the vendor changed. So the lowest apparent bidder is now Crossmatch, which is the same system used by the county, I believe. So Budget impact changes slightly. So the system being a bit more expensive, the grant is still going to cover the same amount, the $13,891.59. City contribution to the purchase would be $7,890.23. And there still is sufficient funds in the police operating budget to cover that. So staff is recommending that the City Council approve selection of cross-match the apparent low bidder for the procurement of live scan system. Any questions?
Did cross-match not match the RFP that you put out, or quote? I mean, the equipment listed wasn't right.
Well, what it was, originally we went forward with biometrics.
Uh-huh.
They're the original apparent low bidder. In their backup paperwork, they actually had additional costs associated specifically to the cabinet that we needed for the system, just because of the configuration of the police department facility. And that was something that we thought was included originally, but when we tried to order the system, they added a substantial additional cost.
Optional.
Did all three go up, or just the one we picked?
DataWorks Plus is the one we were originally going to go with.
Oh yeah, it was DataWorks Plus, sorry.
And they're the one that had the optional cabinet. We didn't realize that in the bid process. Crossmatch had in the biometrics, those are the original costs. So we did
So for anybody on the record, Chief Denny just clarified that was actually DataWorks Plus that we originally awarded to. I misspoke. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any discussion? Questions?
Comments?
We need it. We need it.
Mayor, I move to approve the selection of Crossmatch as the apparent low bidder for a live scan system and direct staff to proceed with the procurement as outlined in Exhibit A of this agenda item.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the selection of Crossmatch as the apparent low bidder for the live scan system and direct staff to proceed with the procurement as outlined in Exhibit A of the agenda item. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. That concludes our meeting for this evening. If I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for attending this evening, folks. Have a great evening.
Hey, Matt, do you have any chance to look up there at that park area?